There are two types of journalists in Europe today. Some deny Russia's advances, and others say these advances are insignificant. This war went to space a long time ago. The country is in a terrible situation, but the media keeps pushing for war. I call these people funeral cheerleaders. This is one of the most immoral things I have ever seen in my life. Hello, combatant from the War Channel. In today's video, we are going to talk a little about what is happening with the media in general regarding the Ukrainian case. But before we start, I wanted to tell you that I am Commander Robinson Farinazzo, a retired officer of the Brazilian Navy, and this is the Art of War Channel, a vehicle for military, strategic, and geopolitical analysis with a professional focus. So if you're new here, subscribe to the channel, comment, share, like, and leave your comments and spread it on your social networks. If you can help with super sticker, super chat, or pics, you will be contributing to the growth of our media. That said, let's get to today's video. Well, what's happening is this. I've been following some European media, which I always like to know what people are saying, right? Then you multiply it by -1, and you understand the reality of the facts. There are two types of journalists in Europe today. Some deny Russia's advances, and others say these advances are insignificant. So if they are denying, one side says they advance, the other says the advances are insignificant. And we see Ukraine recruiting everyone who has some ability to fight. Then you understand the following. This war went to space a long time ago. But we notice, and I find it impressive, the media's reaction to Viktor Orban's visit to Russia. Because like it or not, if some peace process is achieved now, any peace process is profitable for Ukraine. The country is in a terrible situation, so a peace agreement, ceasefire, whatever it is, although I doubt that Russia will accept a ceasefire, would be an advantage for Ukraine. That's the truth. But the media keeps pushing for war. I call these people funeral cheerleaders. They keep pushing Ukrainians to war, a country that has already been massacred, that is suffering horrors, that threw its youth into the battlefield, and those journalists keep pushing. This is immoral. This is one of the most immoral things I have ever seen in my life. It's this cheering that journalists do for Ukraine to continue shredding its youth on the battlefield. It's very sad what is happening. I wonder, if one of these journalists had their child on the front line, in the line of fire, would they actively take this kind of attitude? Why are we talking about this? Because in fact, these days I was watching an interview with a Ukrainian here on the channel. I was re-watching what he said. He said something that is a great truth. For the Ukrainian government, it's much cheaper to send unprepared people to the battlefield, for them to die and achieve some minimal result. If they will achieve it, at least they will tell NATO that they are fighting, than to spend on specialized training and building defensive positions. Because that has a cost. I always say the following. If you want to build good defensive positions, you need cement, you need wood, you need barbed wire, you need mines, you need artillery, a series of other things that they don't have. Besides the scandals, corruption scandals, misappropriation of money that was intended for defensive positions. For this, I need to talk a little about corruption in this war. I see there, from time to time, news from the FSB, the Russian police arresting Russian military personnel for corruption. I think the following way. Folks, the impression I have, from the experience we have in military analysis, is that the concern is not so much internal corruption, because corruption exists everywhere in the world, price overbilling, etc. Overbilling the number of combatants to receive salaries. You have that everywhere. I don't think the concern is that. The concern is to prevent what happened to Saddam Hussein's army in various wars from happening to the Russian army in Ukraine. The generals sold themselves to the United States, and they ended up changing the battlefield outcome. I don't doubt that they have already tried that. I don't doubt that Russia has a great concern in this regard. Even because this works on both sides. If on one side there is corruption in Russia, in Ukraine there is much more. We saw some cases there. Recently, an American general died in Ukraine. And there was also the case of an American military attaché who was murdered there at the Hilton Hotel in Kiev. Now, this thing was either done by Ukrainians or Ukrainians gave the job to the Russians. That's the big truth. But in any case, there is a great infiltration of Russian intelligence services in the upper echelon of Ukraine. Due to corruption, they know each other well. So it is not difficult for these things to actually be happening. I always say the following: the guy who goes to Ukraine to fight there as a volunteer must be very careful. You don't know who the guy next to you is. If this person is not selling information to Russia, this happens much more often than we think. The case of this American general, who they say died in a base in the California desert, we are sure he died in Ukraine. It is a typical case, because for Russia to know the position of a United States general there, someone gave this job, this information. It was probably some Ukrainian. So this is not the first general to die. We already have news of at least 3 American generals, 1 French and 1 Polish, besides others who must have gone unnoticed by our radar. But that this will come to light sooner or later, there is no doubt. Now it is even interesting, because in 10 years of massive involvement in the Vietnam War, the Americans lost 8 generals. Now in less than 3 years in Ukraine, they have already lost 3, so it's quite complicated. We think there is more to come, because as the war comes to an end, many people will want to make a nest egg, fix their financial lives, and they end up accepting to sell information to Russia. Nowadays, high-level information like this is worth as much as a missile. Whatever it is, one thing or another, you kill an enemy general and the morale of that troop goes way down. That's the truth. So these things, all this we are seeing, these media disparities, these general deaths, all this corruption is an indication that the end is near. The situation is very complicated in the war in Ukraine. We, who follow it through journalists, I always say the following: do you want to know how the war in Ukraine is? Just look at the behavior of the European press. If it has stopped talking, if the press is not saying anything, it's because the war is going very badly. When the press speaks well, you can be sure they are throwing the Ukrainian army into the fire to burn. They talk about the offensive, offensive, offensive. That is funeral cheerleaders. They are encouraging the Ukrainian army to throw itself under Russian artillery. This is the picture we have today. Well, this week on the 9th, we have the NATO summit. We're going to wait for the result. But anything other than the immediate admission of Ukraine into NATO indicates a failure at the summit. If they don't do that, if they don't have an immediate admission of Ukraine into NATO, which I doubt, you can be sure that this summit was a failure. Despite the press, kid channels, which are all the same garbage, putting themselves to say and praise, saying it was a success, most likely this summit failed even before it started.